Well, hello and welcome to our Friday night Bible study. This is for Friday, November the 8th, 2024. And where we are right now, it was raining. I don't know if it's raining at the moment, but it's wet out. And I think last week we talked a little bit about a project I had going out in the yard, and how the rain kind of got in the way of that. And what I did was I dug a hole in the yard. I'm going to show it to you here in a moment. And I was, exposing the main water valve to our house so it'd be easier to reach it and maybe get rid of the hole in the yard in the process, because it was at the end of a plastic pipe, and UV works on that plastic, and it began to crack and crumble, and the land was caving in beside of it and putting a hole there. I was uncomfortable with it, so I wanted to do something different. So a couple of weeks ago, almost, I dug a big hole around it, planning to brick up a little box around it, and got the hole dug, and then it rained. So I couldn't lay the bricks. And it was wet early last week. I went out to work on it Wednesday. There was still too much water in the bottom of the hole. So I went out Thursday, and this is what I saw. You can see the handle on the valve there. You can see the pipe. If you look real closely, you can actually see the pipe coming in from the street there, and then it makes a 90 headed toward the house, and that the valve is right there. And right there on the bottom you can see the red brick. That's brick that I dug up, that came up as I dug the hole. It came up with it. So I put it down, and what you're seeing there in the gray is the first tier of bricks I was going to put down without mortar and just rest them on those other bricks to have kind of a foundation for it. So then yesterday I went out and I was able to mix up the mortar mix that I had bought. I cleaned those bricks up and kind of rearranged them a little bit. And then I set to work laying the bricks. I'm not a real great at it. It was down in a hole where it was hard to measure and get everything really straight, but this is what I came up with. So that's the structure, and that's what it looks like now. It's raining again, so it's probably going to fill up with water again. I've got the hole covered with the boards that I intend to use to cut up and bolt together to make a cover for that little brick well there. And then I can fill in the earth around it, and I've got some sod that I dug up that I can put back in place around it. A little more work to do, so that's what was going on around this place over the weekend, and so I need that back up, but I need a different tab open. We do have a sermon presentation prepared and ready. In fact, I've got it open right now. I went in and proofread it. I'll probably proofread it one more time. I did find some things that I thought didn't come out quite the way I wanted them to, or where a phrase was kind of hanging out there in the middle of nowhere and didn't make sense where it was. And the reason for that was I was thinking about what somebody did at a young age. But then when I got to say it, it was a she in the Old Testament. Females didn't have a lot of power then. Decisions weren't made by the girls, they were made by their fathers. So then I'm writing what her father does. At a young age, her father, blah, blah, blah. Well, that didn't work out very well. So I had to change that around and put the at a young age in a different place so it was clear that it referred to the lady in question. So you'll see that when we do our sermon presentation. If it goes as usual, we will schedule that to show up on the group at 11 o'clock, 11 a.m. Central Time. That's when we'll set it to show up on the Facebook group and be available from that point forward. Just like normally when we upload these Friday night Bible studies to the group, we schedule them to post at 6 p.m. Now, when we were doing it live, we used to do it at 6:30 to around 8, about an hour and a half. But we were having so much trouble with our internet connection being reliable and having breaks in it and getting cut off and having, in some cases, even to restart a stream in the middle because of all that we have started recording ahead of time, and so that's what we're doing here, and that's how I plan to do it. Of course, if something happens and I sleep in and don't get up in time to record it, we may end up doing it live and just crossing our fingers and hoping that our internet connection won't drop out in the middle of the thing. Of course, we usually do that for roughly half the time of the Friday night Bible study, so it's about half the opportunity for the internet connection to go wonky and mess with us. So I guess we can just go ahead and bow our heads and get started. Our Father in heaven, we thank you for your blessings. We thank you for the written word. And we thank you that it's been given so that we can see how you have interacted with humanity in the past. We can see the history, and we can decipher there, through the lens of the cross, what you are trying to do with humanity and where you want to take us. So as we open these words and study, we ask that the Holy Spirit will be close to each person to help them receive the blessing and understanding that you intend. We ask in Jesus' name. Amen. So, we got into Deuteronomy actually we got into Deuteronomy 2 weeks ago, and we stopped just before chapter 6 because I wanted to discuss a little bit the wording of chapter 6 verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our gods, the Lord is one. And I used the plural for gods there because in the Hebrew, the word from which we translate God there is plural. So we should translate it in the plural, right? We don't, because to us it doesn't make sense in English. But at any rate, so we spent a little time on that, and we looked at some of the other things. We skipped over a lot of stuff, but we read the rules about going to war and what you were and were not supposed to do, how you weren't supposed to destroy any fruit-bearing trees when you were laying siege to a city. All of this, of course, assumes that the nation is going to go to war, which was kind of a given in that day and age. I mean, we aren't free of war in our own day and age. There's war taking place right now in Ukraine and in other parts of the world, and who knows, our own country may end up engaged in military activities before long. That remains to be seen. So yeah, when you live in a broken, violent world, you can expect wars to break out and disasters to result. I was noticing in the news, there's another hurricane going. The tropical depression that was moving into the Gulf of Mexico has developed into a hurricane. Its name begins with R. I forget the actual name right now, but it began with R, and it is, if I recall correctly, it's currently rated as a Category 3 hurricane, and it is threatening western Cuba, which means that there will likely be some trouble, bad weather, winds, maybe damage and so forth in Havana. And even before I knew the storm was going to hit Cuba, I had, for some reason, been exploring Havana in Google Earth. Uh, Havana is, at least the parts of it that I was able to see pictures of, because Google has not been able to get street view pictures throughout Havana, or for that matter, any of the rest of Cuba. So all they have is the individual 360 shots that people upload to Google, and sometimes they show a dot on the map, but it's not really quite right in the correct place, and so you go in to see something, you find out you're actually someplace else looking at somebody's 360 picture. But the point is, I was looking at those, and Havana looks like a rundown city with worn buildings, cracking facades. So it might not stand up well to hurricane force winds. That remains to be seen. And of course, given the strained relations between our government and the government of Cuba, it'll probably be difficult to get news out of Cuba once the hurricane passes. So, probably social media will be the primary source of information about conditions in Cuba after this storm. Yeah. Well, how did I get into that? I guess I was talking about war and so forth. That made me think of what I had seen in Havana and of the storm threatening it. So the forecasts have changed, and of course they don't know what's going to happen once it crosses Cuba. But in general, it looks like they expect it to kind of peter out as it goes on through the Gulf of Mexico, and may not make landfall in the United States at all, or if it does, mostly just as a lot of rain. Which is kind of interesting because we did have a threat of violent weather come through our area. I had run on one of the internet weathercasters' streams and was watching it. This was on Monday. I was about to go shopping, and I saw that there were notices for severe weather to the west of us. And I thought, well, maybe I better go get my shopping done, get back home before the severe weather arrives. And it's rainy and hard to get from the store to the car and so forth. Well, I needn't have worried. It never really quite got to us until the next day when it started raining, and that's why Wednesday, when I went out there to work on that hole in the yard, the hole was still too wet. So there were tornadoes, but they were mostly in neighboring states, and Texas is one of the states that had some problems, Texas and Oklahoma, and I think there were some tornadoes detected in Missouri, and they had some pictures of some damage that I saw in the Missouri area. So, well, now we're on to Deuteronomy 27. Again, I figure we'll probably go pretty quickly through the rest of Deuteronomy. And here it talks about an altar on Mount Ebal. And it says, Then Moses and the leaders of Israel gave this charge to the people, Obey all these commands that I'm giving you today. When you cross the Jordan River and enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, set up some large stones and coat them with plaster. Write this whole body of instruction on them when you cross the river to enter the land the Lord your God is giving you, a land flowing with milk and honey, just as the Lord, the God of your ancestors, promised you. When you cross the Jordan, set up these stones at Mount Ebal and coat them with plaster, as I am commanding you today. Mount Ebal is the Mount of Curses, whereas Mount Gerizim was the Mount of Blessing. Then build an altar there to the Lord your God using natural uncut stones. You must not shape the stones with an iron tool. Build the altar of uncut stones and use it to offer burnt offerings to the Lord your God. Also sacrifice peace offerings on it and celebrate by feasting there before the Lord your God. You must clearly write all these instructions on the stones code with plaster. And so then Moses and the Levitical priests address all Israel. Then they were to read the curses from Mount Ebal. And these are the curses that they were to read. Carves or casts an idol and secretly sets it up. Dishonors father and mother. Steals property by moving a boundary marker. Leads a blind person astray on the road. Denies justice to foreigners, orphans, or widows. Having sexual intercourse with one of his father's wives, for he's violated his father. Or have sexual intercourse with an animal, or have sexual intercourse with his sister, whether she's a half-sister on his mother's side, half-sister on his father's side, or both, obviously. And with his mother-in-law, anyone attacks a neighbor in secret, accepts payment to kill an innocent person, and finally cursed is anyone who does not affirm and obey the terms of these instructions. And all the people will reply, Amen. In the King James, that reads, let all the people say, Amen. I first heard that off in Idaho. A preacher used that, and I found out that there is something of a tradition in Christian circles that if the preacher says, and all the people said, then the crowd is supposed to reply with a unison Amen. I'm going to reveal my bias and prejudice here. If you feel moved when you're hearing a presentation, you want to say amen, good thing, great. But I think it is self-serving for a speaker to say things like, can I get a witness, or something, trying to encourage the people to respond and say amen, and so forth. That bothers me. That's just my personal bias. So that was chapter 27. Here's chapter 28. Now I'm just going to point out something here and let you decide what it means. It talks about blessings for obedience. This is in chapter 28. You can see that it's written poetically. The first 7 verses. Let's see. Well, we go on. 9, 10, 11, 14. You must not turn away from any of the commands I'm giving you today, nor follow after other gods and worship them. So 14 verses to talk about the blessings for obedience. You do what I tell you, I'm going to bless you. This is very clearly Old Covenant language, and it is very explicitly stated right here. Keep the rules, and I'll make things go good for you. Break the rules, curses for disobedience here. The same poetic section, but in reverse, in a curse instead of a blessing. And then it goes, and goes, and goes, and wow. 60, verse 68. So we had 14 verses for the blessings. You step 14 from 68, you come up with 54. 54 verses compared to 14 on the curses for disobedience. And if you take my approach to this, there's multiple approaches for why God deals with Israel this way. And of course there are people who will try to tell you that God still deals with the world today in that same way. I think that's hard to argue if you read the book of Job and understand the arguments and so forth that are being made there. But there are people who will tell you that God still works with the world if the nation would obey him, and usually that means if the nation would pass the laws I want to make everybody else do what I think they ought to do, then God would bless it. because the nation hasn't passed that laws, then we're cursed and we have hurricanes and wars and blah blah. That whole mindset that follows with that. But so my approach to that is that God was doing this to demonstrate to the universe what wouldn't work. It would seem logical, and I think it would seem logical to anybody, even any people who have not fallen out of the path of love that God created his entire universe in. It would seem likely even for them to think logically, well, if you've got people that are breaking the rules, aren't acting right, just do good things for them, and when they do the right things, and do bad things to them when they do the wrong things, and that'll correct the situation. A lot of advice about rearing children is founded on that very principle. Good things, reward the children for doing good, and punish them at whatever level you think is appropriate when they're doing bad, and they'll grow up to be good kids. Well, if it were that simple, we would have fixed all the world's problems and there wouldn't be any anymore. It doesn't work. And the situation of our world today ought to be a testament to us that this system doesn't work. The whole history of the nation of Israel is a demonstration that this old covenant approach doesn't work. It didn't fix the nation of Israel. Yeah, there were individuals who were saved. But I'm going to suggest to you that the proportions of saved people in the world is roughly the same as the proportion of saved people in the nation of Israel throughout history. Let's see what the next chapter is. Moses reviews the covenant and talks about Sihon and Og, Heshbon and Bashan, and the land given to the 2.5 tribes. A call to return to the Lord. We might take a little time with this. In the future, when you experience all these blessings and curses I have listed for you, and when you were living among the nations to which the Lord your God has exiled you, take to heart all these instructions. Well, did that happen? Yes, it did happen. We know that from Israel's history, that in fact, at some point, they so ignored what God wanted from them that he allowed them to be taken captive to other nations, and they were in exile for a period of time. If at that time you and your children return to the Lord your God, and if you obey with all your heart and all your soul all the commands I have given you today, then the Lord your God will restore your fortunes. He will have mercy on you and gather you back from all the nations where he has scattered you. Now, the principles stated in these first 3 verses form the foundation of the bulk of Old Testament prophetic writings. You're going to see this repeated again and again and again among the prophets. If you don't return to God, he's going to let this happen. But once it happens, then he's going to come back and he's going to restore you. Even though you are banished to the ends of the earth, the Lord your God will gather you from there and bring you back again. The Lord your God will return you to the land that belonged to your ancestors, and you will possess that land again. Then he will make you even more prosperous and numerous than your ancestors. Footnote, of the heavens, as opposed to ends of the earth, ends of the heavens. Well, yeah, however far away you're scattered, God is able to bring you back. Now, I think the importance of this is that in this we get a better picture of God than we do in most of the descriptions in the books of Moses of what God orders and what God tells him to do and so forth and so on. Because here God is showing how he approaches his covenant relationship with his people. If you're unfaithful, well, there will be problems because that's part of the terms of the covenant, but I can't give up on you entirely. I will always want to bring you back. And that's the history of the human race. The human race abandoned God's plan for life. And he could have just let us go, and the natural result of death would have ensued, and God could have started over. But that's not who God is. Now, there's this argument about whether God has abandoned Israel. Well, no, God hasn't abandoned Israel. The only thing that's changed is that as a people, they're no longer special and unique among the people of the world. They're the same as everybody else. But God hasn't given up on them. He still calls to them. He still wants to restore and heal them. It's just not a political, national thing any longer. The Lord your God will change your heart, footnote B, or circumcise your heart. Well, okay, yeah. And the hearts of all your descendants, so that you will love him with all your heart and soul, and so you may live. In other words, if you come back to the principles of love, you will live. That's the condition for life. Life doesn't work outside that design. The Lord your God will inflict all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate and persecute you. Well, he doesn't have to inflict it. If they hate you because you live by love, then they don't live by love, and the natural result of that is death. Then you will again obey the Lord and keep all his commands that I'm giving you today. Again, we have to read through the wording of the Old Covenant here, but we can still see God's heart and character and intent in these words. God will make you successful in everything you do. You'll have many children, numerous livestock. Your fields will produce abundant harvest, and God will delight in being good to you, and so forth. The choice of life or death. And this command I'm giving you today is not too difficult for you, and it's not beyond your reach. In other words, God worded the Ten Commandments in such a way, in the negative, so it wouldn't be hard to keep them. It is not kept in heaven, so distant you must ask, who will go up to heaven to bring it down so we can hear and obey? It is not kept beyond the sea so far away that you must ask, who will cross the sea to bring it to us so we can hear it and obey? No, the message is very close at hand. It is on your lips and in your heart so that you can obey it. Now listen, today I'm giving you a choice between life and death, between prosperity and disaster. Now again, this is being worded in terms of the Old Covenant, but also for us today, that's still the choice. Life results from following the design for life prepared by the Creator. So we have a choice. Live as he designed us to live, and therefore live eternally, or live as we're accustomed to living, as we've been told we should live by the world around us, which is not compatible with life, and therefore we end up dying. For I command you this day to love the Lord your God and to keep his commands, decrees, and regulations by walking in his ways. If you do this, you will live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land you're about to enter and occupy. But if not, well, then things won't go quite that way. Today I have given you the choice between life and death, blessings and curses. Now I call on heaven and earth to witness the choice you make. Oh, that you would choose life so that you and your descendants might live. Again, God's not out to catch you and make it hard for you, even though Jesus talked about the wide way and the narrow way. That's not God's choice. That's humanity's nature. I want you to choose life. Oh, that you would choose life so that you and your descendants might live. You can make this choice by loving the Lord your God, obeying Him, and committing yourself firmly to Him. This or He is the key to your life. And if you, well, obviously, He's the creator. He's the giver of life. So He's the key to it. If we're connected to Him as the branch to the vine, we talked about that in our last sermon presentation, then we have life. You will live long in the land the Lord swore to give to your ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Deuteronomy 31, Joshua becomes Israel's leader. So Moses tells the people, I'm now 120 years old, no longer am able to lead you. The Lord has told me you will not cross the Jordan River. Remember, that had to do with his actions at the rock the second time that he brought water from the rock. He was told to speak to it. Instead, he struck it twice, and he dishonored God in so doing. But the Lord your God Himself will cross over ahead of you. He will destroy the nations living there, and you will take possession of their land. Joshua will lead you across the river, just as the Lord promised. Now, other than Moses and Caleb, Joshua is the oldest man in Israel. Remember, other than him, there is nobody left over 60. All the ones who were 20 years old or older at the time they turned back died in the desert. So only Caleb, Joshua, and Moses at this point remain of those people at that time who were over 20. Therefore, since they spent 40 years in the wilderness, therefore, there's nobody over 60 except for these. The Lord will destroy the nations living in the land, just as He destroyed Sihon and Og, the kings of the Amorites. The Lord will hand you over to the people who lived there, hand over to you the people who live there, and you must deal with them as I have commanded you. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid, and do not panic before them, for the Lord your God will personally go ahead of you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. Then Moses called for Joshua, and as all Israel watched, he said to him, Be strong and courageous, for you will lead these people into the land that the Lord swore to their ancestors He would give them. You are the one who will divide it among them as their grants of land. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord will personally go ahead of you. He will be with you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. Now, it's easy to read this and think about what they're about to do and think, well, this means God is approving of what they're about to do. No, God is remaining faithful to His people and to His promise and bearing with their sin in thinking that violence was the way to get what they wanted. Public reading of the book of instruction. Moses wrote the instruction book, gave it to the priests, and at the end of every 7th year, the year of release, during the festival of shelters, you must read this book of instruction to all the people of Israel when they assemble before the Lord. Remind them what the rules are. Israel's disobedience predicted. The Lord said to Moses, You're about to die and join your ancestors. After you're gone, these people will begin to worship foreign gods, the gods of the land where they are going. They will abandon me and break my covenant that I have made with them. And he goes on. So he tells him to write down the words of a song and to teach it to the people of Israel. Help them to learn it, so it may serve as a witness for me against them. For I will bring them into the land I swore to give their ancestors. There they will become prosperous, eat all the food they want, become fat. But they will begin to worship other gods. They will despise me and break my covenant. And when great disasters come down on them, this song will stand as evidence against them, for it will never be forgotten by their descendants. I know the intentions of these people, even now before they've entered the land I swore to give them. In other words, God knows human nature. He knows what we're like, and so He can tell what we're going to do. And He knew that the people of Israel would fall victim to idolatry. Then the Lord commissioned Joshua son of Nun with these words, Be strong and courageous, for you must bring the people of Israel into the land I swore to give them. I will be with you. And So he wrote the entire body of instruction in a book, gave the command to the Levites who carried the Ark of the Covenant, take this book of instruction and place it beside the Ark of the Covenant, the Lord your God, so it would remain there as a witness against the people of Israel. And some people point out, they like to make a distinction between the Ten Commandment law and the ceremonial law. The ceremonial law was put in this book of instruction, carried beside the ark, whereas the Ten Commandment law was etched on stone and placed inside the ark. And these things are all true. The point is they're both rule-based, and that's the problem with them. But yeah, he does give greater honor to the Ten Commandment law as opposed to all the other laws that were involved there. Now summon all the elders and officials of your tribe so I can speak to them directly and call heaven and earth to witness against them. I know that after my death you will become utterly corrupt and will turn from the way I have commanded you to follow. In the days to come, disaster will come down on you, for you will do what is evil in the Lord's sight, making him very angry with your actions. So Moses recited this entire song publicly to the assembly of Israel, end of chapter 31. Yes. Deuteronomy chapter 32. Here it is. You can see that these translators have rendered it poetically, that it is in the form of Hebrew poetry, and it's fairly lengthy. There it is. So it goes down to verse 43. Let me see if I can kind of skim through this, kind of pick out the things. Let my teaching fall on you like rain, let my speech settle like dew. I will proclaim the name of the Lord. How glorious is our God. He is the rock. His deeds are perfect. Everything he does is just and fair. He is a faithful God who does no wrong. How just and upright he is. But they have acted corruptly toward him. When they act so perversely, are they really his children? Or, footnote A, how far down do we have to go to get those footnotes? The meaning of the Hebrew is uncertain. So that's just the translator's interpretation. They are a deceitful and twisted generation. Is this the way you repay the Lord, you foolish and senseless people? Isn't he your Father who created you? Has he not made you and established you? Remember the days of long ago. Think about the generations past. Ask your father. He will inform you. Inquire of your elders, and they will tell you. When the Most High assigned lands to the nations, when he divided up the human race, he established the boundaries of the peoples according to the number in his heavenly court. Footnote B for that, as in the Dead Sea Scrolls, which read the number of the sons of God, and the Greek version, which reads the number of the angels of God. The Masoretic text reads the number of the sons of Israel. So we can see the Dead Sea Scrolls are late Jewish documents. The Greek version was based on the Jews in Egypt who translated the Old Testament from Hebrew into Greek for the Greek libraries at Alexandria. According to the number in his heavenly, or the number of the sons of Israel, he divided up the land according to how many people would live on it, that kind of thing. The people of Israel belong to the Lord. Jacob is his special protection. He found them in a desert land, in an empty, howling wasteland. He surrounded them and watched over them. He guarded them as he would guard his own eyes, like an eagle that rouses her chicks and hovers over her young. So he spread his wings to take them up and carried them safely on his pinions. The Lord alone guided them. They followed no foreign gods. He let them ride over the highlands and feast on the crops of the fields. He nourished them with honey from the rock and olive oil from the stony ground. He fed them yogurt from the herd and milk from the flock, together with the fat of lambs. He gave them choice rams from Bashan, and goats, together with the choicest wheat. You drank the finest wine, made from the juice of grapes. But Israel soon became fat and unruly. The people grew heavy, plump, and stuffed. Then they abandoned the God who had made them. They made light of the rock of their salvation. Well, that's again human nature. That's one of the problems with the old covenant. If you obey God, he'll bless you, but if he blesses you, you're human. You're going to take that blessing for granted, and you're going to get entitled, fat, lazy, etc., etc. And then you're going to forget God. You're going to forget his way, and problems will result. And so it talks about these things. They have roused my jealousy by worshiping things that are not God. My anger blazes like fire and burns from the depths of the grave, so on and so forth. I will heap disaster upon them. I will shoot them down with my arrows. I will weaken them with famine, burning fever, and deadly disease. These are the words that Moses prepared. But I feared the taunt of Israel's enemy, who might misunderstand and say, our own power has triumphed. The Lord has nothing to do with this. This is happening because I'm so great. Well, that's human nature again. If something happens that favors us and we think it's a demonstration of how great and wonderful we are. Well, no, it's just things happen. Indeed, the Lord will give justice to his people, and he will change his mind about his servants. When he sees their strength is gone, and no one is left slave or free, then he will ask, where are their gods, the rocks they fled to for refuge? Where now are those gods who ate the fat of their sacrifices and drank the wine of their offerings? Let those gods arise and help you. Let them provide you with shelter. Look now, I myself am he. There is no other God but me. Now, again, I know you can find hymns that say this. We don't buy into these next two lines. I am the one who kills and gives life. I am the one who wounds and heals. He gives life, the destroyer kills. He heals, the destroyer wounds. But if God does not protect you from the destroyer, then these things happen. And if you do not open your life to his intervention and healing, he can't heal and protect. Then he talks about taking revenge on his enemies. We should understand that in the light of the revenge described in Isaiah, where God will thoroughly purge away their dross. Verse 43, I'm going to go ahead and read it again. Rejoice with him, you heavens, and let all of God's angels worship him. Which, by the way, is something that gets quoted in the New Testament, in the book of Hebrews. Rejoice with his people, you Gentiles, let all the angels be strengthened in him. For he will avenge the blood of his children, he will take revenge against his enemies, he will repay those who hate him and cleanse his people's land. So even here, we get a sense, although it's not as clear as in Isaiah, that for God to take vengeance is for him to cleanse and purify. He repays those who hate them by making them his friends, if he can. If not, then he abandons them to the natural results of their choices. So Moses came with Joshua, son of Nun, recited all the words of this song to the people. And this is what is often referred to as the Song of Moses. And when we read in Revelation about the Song of Moses and the Lamb, some people want to refer back to this because it is the Song of Moses. But it is a call to faithfulness, which is the root word behind the faith described in the New Testament, that essentially be faithful to God. So when Moses had finished reciting all these words to the people of Israel, he added, "Take to heart all the words of the warning that I have given you today. Pass them on as a command to your children, so they will obey every word of these instructions. These instructions are not empty words, they are your life. By obeying them, you will enjoy a long life in the land you will occupy when you cross the Jordan River." That same day, the Lord said to Moses, "Go to Moab, to the mountains east of the river, and climb Mount Nebo." Now, would be the mountains of Abarim. That's what the Hebrew says. And the name Abarim lasts for that area even today. Climb Mount Nebo, which is across from Jericho. Look out across the land of Canaan, the land I'm giving to the people of Israel as their own special possession. Then you will die there on the mountain. You will join your ancestors, just as Aaron your brother died on Mount Hor and joined his ancestors. For both of you betrayed me with the Israelites at the waters of Meribah at Kadesh, in the wilderness of Zin. You failed to demonstrate my holiness to the people of Israel there, so you will see the land from a distance, but you may not enter the land I am giving to the people of Israel. Now, let's see. Yeah, Moses blesses the people and the tribes. I don't know that I'm going to get into this. We've gone through the tribes before, and we have taken, you could take time to go through and compare what's said about each tribe, what Jacob said about his sons, what was said earlier about the tribes, and what's said here. Let's see, I believe, there's going to be another chapter. Then Moses went up to Mount Nebo from the plains of Moab and climbed Pisgah Peak, which is across from Jericho. And the Lord showed him the whole land, from Gilead as far as Dan, all the land of Naphtali, the land of Ephraim and Manasseh, all extending to the Mediterranean Sea, the Negev, the Jordan Valley of Jericho, the city of palms as far as Zoar. Then the Lord said to Moses, "This is the land I promised on oath to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob when I said, I will give it to your descendants. I have now allowed you to see it with your own eyes, but you will not enter the land." So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there in the land of Moab, just as the Lord had said. The Lord buried him in a valley near Beth Peor in Moab, but to this day no one knows the exact place. Footnote B, Hebrew, he buried him. The Samaritan Pentateuch and some Greek manuscripts read, they buried him. But if they buried him, then someone would know. If God buried him, then no one would know, and that's what it says. Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyesight was clear, and he was as strong as ever. The people of Israel mourned for Moses on the plains of Moab for 30 days until the customary period of mourning was over. Now Joshua son of Nun was full of the spirit of wisdom, for Moses had laid his hands on him. So the people of Israel obeyed him, doing just as the Lord had commanded Moses. There has never been another prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. The Lord sent him to perform all the miraculous signs and wonders in the land of Egypt against Pharaoh and all his servants and his entire land. With mighty power, Moses performed terrifying acts in the sight of all Israel. End of the book. Now, you may notice that in this tab here, I have Mount Nebo brought up on Wikipedia. Mount Nebo, they're showing you there in a map about where it is. An Italian artist has prepared a brass serpent sculpture to stand on this mountain with a view towards the Dead Sea in Jerusalem. And we're going to do some viewing of that. Here's a picture. You can't see it. Let me go this view real quick. There, now you can see the picture of Mount Nebo as seen from the east. Now it was interesting because I looked it up in my Bible dictionary, and the Bible dictionary says they didn't know where this was until recently. Well, I find that hard to believe because, as I'm going to show you here, a mosaic floor in the icon baptistry, history of the modern memorial of Moses. And you can see there the old pre-2017 structure protecting the excavated church remains, and then the new structure. Now, we're about to look at the new structure by calling this up. That is, what's the date on that? Okay, the person who put this up, Brand Blue 360, didn't put a date on this, but this is clearly post 2017. And you can see the modern structure, where the modern structure begins, covering the older structure. The original structure on this site was put there in the 5th century, that is in the years numbered 400 of the Common Era. So it's been there for a long time. Now, did the church in that time really know for sure where was Mount Nebo, or did they just go look for a likely site and say, well, this looks like it, so we're going to call this it and build a church here? At any rate, this structure is still here. Now I want to exit Street View from here and take you over here and see if I can find the picture that's taken right by the brass serpent statue. I'm thinking that might be one of these. Let's see what that one is. What you can see here, I mean, it's hazy, but you can see, yeah, we're looking to the west and sort of north. This one's not as clear as some of the others. Yeah, there's the bronze serpent statue. There is a picture taken from right there in front of it. Let's see if I can find that, because I think it's a little clearer. Like I say, when people put up these individual photos, they're not always real accurate about the placement of their dots. I think I just got the same one. I did. Okay. I was trying to get a different one. Let's do a reset here real quick. And come on. There. Maybe this one. We'll try that. Well, okay. Yeah. Well, that's close to what I was looking for, because there you can see that bronze serpent statue. And maybe if you look this way, well, it's still hazy. You really can't see. There was one where you could see a little better. You could actually see the northern end of the Dead Sea. You could see the land, but this one's so hazy that it doesn't really get you the view I was hoping for. I suppose I could try this one and see what that was like. This is oh wow, no, you're not going to see anything with that. Look at how hazy and cloudy that is. So that was on a very bad day. Like I say, there was one, you can see that little cage there. There was one taken right there that I saw earlier, and I'm not able to get back into it. And I'm going to bore you to tears if I keep standing here trying. Maybe if I go there. Now that one's not any better. Although you can see they're a little bit higher here. You can see the crowd there. Yeah, it's obviously a popular place. Lots of people like to go there and take pictures, but it's hard to see what could be seen from there on a clear day, because none of these pictures, it's a clear day, and I'm just going to give up here. This is crazy. So this is possibly the site, but we can't guarantee it. So it's just, yeah, if something was determined in the early years after Christ was on earth, particularly after 200 or 300 years when the church began to corrupt itself with lust for power, that some of the determinations they made about which site was what in the Holy Land, I tend to be a bit skeptical about them. We may not be able to tell for sure. That's just what is popularly determined to be Mount Nebo. So, and let's go back to our standard Friday night layout here and cross over into the next book. Now we're in the book of Joshua. This is, as I already said, the book that causes problems for so many young Christians, because people lead them to Christ. They tell them that God is good, that Jesus is the representation of Christ. And then they get to this book and they read genocide, and they read that through Moses God ordered all this genocide, and they're like, wait a minute. I mean, there's cognitive dissonance there. You cannot deny it. If God is good, what's going on here? And as we examine this, yeah, it's difficult. It is hard to read these things in the Old Testament and come away understanding a non-violent, benevolent creator who is not a destroyer, who is not toxic. And particularly when we get to some of the things going on in this book where we see clear indication of divine involvement, and that would lend credence to the idea that God condoned and ordered of the genocide that these people carried out as they moved back into the land of Canaan. And one of the approaches taken to it is for people to say, we've mentioned this before, well, these were the Canaanites that were wicked. They had terrible practices. Their worship was sexual in nature. They offered their children as sacrifices. They were just so wicked that God had no choice but to destroy them. But that kind of flies in the face of some of the other things that we read, where God says, I'm not giving you this land because you're good. I'm giving it to you because I promised to. God is faithful. Humans are not. So anyway, here we go. The Lord's charge to Joshua after the death of Moses, the Lord's servant. The Lord spoke to Joshua, son of Nun, Moses' assistant. He said, Moses, my servant, is dead. Therefore the time has come for you to lead these people, the Israelites, across the Jordan River into the land I am giving you. I promise you what I promised Moses. Wherever you set foot, you will be on land I have given you, from the Negev wilderness in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, from the Euphrates River in the east to the Mediterranean Sea in the west. Now that's a big territory. And let's just briefly go back to Google Earth and reset our view again and zoom out. I'm going to take a whole lot of zooming out here. So there's the Dead Sea, and there's the Negev down here. There's Beersheba, the southern extent, and Dan would be up here north. The mountains of, well, there's Tyre and Sidon. Modern Lebanon is there's Beirut, yeah. So that's Lebanon. So there's the land. There's the Mediterranean. If you go over here to the Euphrates River, you go a long ways. There's the Euphrates. Let me move it down here where you can see it better. Down through here, there's Baghdad, and ancient Babylon would be somewhere in that area. And so the Tigris and Euphrates rivers come down there, come together, dump into the Persian Gulf. So if he's saying all the way from the Euphrates River, the river, over, or is that a modern interpretation, or did perhaps God intend the Jordan River to be the boundary, with the Transjordan tribes the only ones east of the Jordan? Hard to say. So, including, and by the way, footnote A, Mediterranean Sea, the Great Sea, yeah. Uh, I, I don't know. I want to look up that passage in the NIV because I seem to recall that the Hebrew doesn't specifically name the river, it just says the river. But let me confirm that here. Um, Okay, well, it didn't say anything, so it may actually name the Euphrates. I don't know. Including all the land of Hittites, no one will be able to stand against you as long as you live, for I will be with you as I was with Moses. I will not fail you or abandon you. It's a statement of God's faithfulness. Be strong and courageous, for you are the one who will lead these people to possess all the land I swore to their ancestors I would give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the instructions Moses gave you. Do not deviate from them, turning either to the right or to the left. Then you will be successful in everything you do. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night, so you will be sure to obey everything written on it. Only then will you prosper and succeed in all you do. This is my command: be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua then commanded the officers of Israel, go through the camp and tell the people to get their provisions ready. In 3 days you will cross the Jordan River and take possession of the land the Lord your God is giving you. Then Joshua called together the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. He told them, remember what Moses, the servant of the Lord, commanded you. The Lord your God is giving you a place of rest. He has given you this land where they currently are dwelling. Your wives, children, and livestock may remain here in the land Moses assigned to you on the east side of the Jordan River. But your strong warriors, fully armed, must lead the other tribes across the Jordan to help them conquer their territory. Stay with them until the Lord gives them rest as he has given you rest, and until they too possess the land the Lord your God is giving them. Only then may you return and settle here on the east side of the Jordan River, in the land that Moses, the servant of the Lord, assigned to you. They answered Joshua, we will do whatever you command us, and we will go wherever you send us. We will obey you just as we obeyed Moses, and may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. Anyone who rebels against your orders and does not obey your words and everything you command will be put to death. So be strong and courageous. Well, that's how they dealt with dissent in those days. Dissent was dealt with harshly. Life was not particularly precious. We're going to see some of that in our sermon presentation tomorrow. They were more concerned what happened to the corpses and with protecting the people when they were still alive. Kind of counterintuitive, but that's human nature again. Chapter 2. Then Joshua secretly sent out 2 spies from the Israelite camp at Acacia Grove. He instructed them to scout out the land on the other side of the Jordan River, especially around Jericho. So the 2 men set out and came to the house of a prostitute named Rahab and stayed there that night. Now, the NIV puts a footnote there on that term prostitute and allows it might mean innkeeper. And we'll comment on that in a moment. There was a footnote there. Yeah, Shittim, or the acacia grove. We use the term acacia instead of shittim for that kind of wood these days. But someone told the king of Jericho, some Israelites have come here tonight to spy out the land. So the king of Jericho sent orders to Rahab, bring out the men who have come into your house, for they have come here to spy out the whole land. Now, the Bible does indeed use the term prostitute here, and the NIV suggests that maybe it's innkeeper. Well, if they're going to show up in a strange city, they're going to go to a temporary dwelling place, an inn or a hotel or motel, we might call it today, and they would take up residence in that place. That's what you do when you visit. So they go to the local innkeeper. Now, was she a prostitute? Well, yes, she probably was. And why is that? Well, if you are providing the needs for shelter and a place to sleep when someone comes to visit, might you not also, in the process, provide other services that a man might expect when he's at home? So the role of innkeeper and prostitute might well have been one role for the same person. And in Jericho, Rahab filled that role. So this woman, whatever her livelihood is, whatever her background is, we aren't given a lot, makes up her mind to deal with these men who have come to her house. And it says here that Rahab had hidden the two men. But she replied, yes, the men were here earlier, but I didn't know where they were from. They left the town at dusk as the gates were about to close. I don't know where they went. If you hurry, you can probably catch up with them. Actually, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath bundles of flax she had laid out. Now that didn't make sense to me until recently, when I actually saw a video of somebody processing flax, because flax is the plant that you process to make linen. And that was the luxury cloth at the time. Linen was the comfortable, soft cloth as compared to wool that people used for textiles. And so part of that is laying the plants out to dry at several stages in processing them from a flax plant into linen. So it made perfect sense that she would have had all this stuff on the roof of her house as flax. And so she used this material in bundles and hid these two Israelites underneath them. So the king's men went looking for the spies along the road leading to the shallow crossings of the Jordan River. As soon as the king's men had left, the gate of Jericho was shut. Before the spies went to sleep that night, Rahab went up on the roof to talk with them. She apparently left them up there to keep them hidden. I know the Lord, or Yahweh, has given you this land, she told him. We are all afraid of you. Everyone in the land is living in terror. Given what was about to happen to them, I think that terror is fully justified. For we have heard how the Lord made a dry path for you through the Red Sea when you left Egypt, and we know what you did to Sihon and Og, the two Amorite kings east of the Jordan River, whose people you completely destroyed. And that's footnote C is going to tell us that's the harem. The Hebrew term used here refers to the complete consecration of things or people to the Lord, either by destroying them or by giving them as an offering. The NIV usually says often by totally destroying them. No wonder our hearts have melted in fear. No one has the courage to fight after hearing such things. For the Lord your God is the supreme God of the heavens above and the earth below. Now, she was terrified, but she was also a believer. She believed that the Hebrew God, the Yahweh, was the creator and was in charge on earth. Now swear to me by Yahweh that you will be kind to me and my family, since I have helped you. Give me some guarantee that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live, along with my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families. We offer our own lives as a guarantee for your safety, the men agreed. If you don't betray us, we will keep our promise and be kind to you when the Lord gives us the land. Then, since Rahab's house was built into the town wall, she let them down by a rope through the window. Escape to the hill country, she told them. Hide there for 3 days from the men searching for you. Then, when they have returned, you can go on your way. Before they left, the men told her, we will be bound by the oath we have taken only if you follow these instructions. When we come into the land, you must leave this scarlet rope hanging from the window through which you let us down. And all your family members, your father, mother, brothers, and all your relatives must be here inside the house. If they go out into the street and are killed, it will not be our fault. But if anyone lays a hand on people inside this house, we will accept the responsibility for their death. If you betray us, however, we are not bound by this oath in any way. I accept your terms, she replied, and she sent them on their way, leaving the scarlet rope hanging from the window. Now, it doesn't say specifically there that the scarlet rope is what she used to let them out through the window and outside the city. But it does kind of make sense that that might be the case. And then she left the scarlet rope hanging from the window. The spies went up into the hill country and stayed there 3 days. The men who were chasing them searched everywhere along the road, but they finally returned without success. Then the 2 spies came down from the hill country, crossed the Jordan River, and reported to Joshua all that had happened to them. The Lord has given us the whole land, they said, for all the people in the land are terrified of us. Chapter 3, the Israelites cross the Jordan. And here we're going to see another application of divine power to assist the people. This time, however, it's only to cross the Jordan. Hard to tell what time of year it was, but it was in the spring, and with runoff from the mountains, the Jordan might in fact have been quite full of water. I mean, it is I think they say it's the 10th day of the first month, so that would be in March or so, just as spring is arriving. So yeah, spring runoff, it might well have been a pretty heavy running river at that point. Early the next morning, Joshua and all the Israelites left Acacia Grove and arrived at the banks of the Jordan River, where they camped before crossing. 3 days later, the Israelite officers went through the camp, giving these instructions to the people. When you see the Levitical priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God, move out from your positions and follow them. Since you have never traveled this way before, they will guide you. Stay about half a mile behind them, keeping a clear distance between you and the ark. Make sure you don't come any closer. Footnote there, about 2,000 cubits or 920 meters. So, yeah, roughly half a mile, I guess. Then Joshua told the people, purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will do great wonders among you. In the morning Joshua said to the priests, lift up the Ark of the Covenant and lead the people across the river. And so they started out and went ahead of the people. The Lord told Joshua, today I will begin to make you a great leader in the eyes of all the Israelites. They will know that I am with you, just as I was with Moses. Give this command to the priests who carry the Ark of the Covenant. When you reach the banks of the Jordan River, take a few steps into the river and stop there. So Joshua told the Israelites, come and listen to what the Lord your God says. Today you will know that the living God is among you. He will surely drive out the Canaanites, Hivites, Hittites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites ahead of you. Look, the Ark of the Covenant, which belongs to the Lord of the whole earth, will lead you across the Jordan River. Now choose 12 men from the tribes of Israel, one from each tribe. The priests will carry the Ark of the Lord of all the earth. As soon as their feet touch the water, the flow of water will be cut off upstream, and the river will stand up like a wall. So the people left their camp to cross the Jordan, and the priests who were carrying the Ark of the Covenant went ahead of them. It was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing its banks, so it's agreeing with me that there was a lot of water in the Jordan. But as soon as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, the water above that point began backing up a great distance away to a town called Adam, or Man, which is near Zarethan. And the water below that point flowed on to the Dead Sea, or the, what's the footnote C say there? The Arab of the Salt Sea. All right. Where was I? Yeah, until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed the... Did I skip something? No? Okay, right there. And the water below that point flowed on to the Dead Sea until the riverbed was dry. Then all the people crossed over near the town of Jericho. Meanwhile, the priests, who were carrying the Ark of the Lord's Covenant, stood on dry ground in the middle of the riverbed as the people passed by. About a half mile downstream, if they were supposed to keep a half mile away, obviously. They waited there until the whole nation of Israel had crossed the Jordan on dry ground. So, this is a divine intervention that's similar to what happened at the Red Sea when the Israelites crossed and then the Egyptians tried to cross and got covered up by the water. When all the people had crossed the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, now choose 12 men, one from each tribe. Tell them, take 12 stones from the very place where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan. Carry them out and pile them up at a place where you will camp tonight. So Joshua called together the 12 men he had chosen, one from each of the tribes of Israel. He told them, go into the middle of the Jordan in front of the ark of the Lord your God. Each of you must pick up one stone and carry it out on your shoulder, 12 stones in all, one for each of the 12 tribes of Israel. We will use these stones to build a memorial. In the future, your children will ask you, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them. They remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the Ark of the Lord's Covenant went across. These stones will stand as a memorial among the people of Israel forever. So the men did as Joshua had commanded them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan River, one for each tribe, just as the Lord had told Joshua. They carried them to the place where they camped for the night and constructed the memorial there. Joshua also set up another pile of 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan at the place where the priests who carried the Ark of the Covenant were standing, and they are there to this day. Well, probably not today, but at the point in time when the book of Joshua was written, they were still there. The priests who were carrying the ark stood in the middle of the river until all of the Lord's commands that Moses had given to Joshua were carried out. Meanwhile, the people hurried across the riverbed. And when everyone was safely on the other side, the priests crossed over with the ark of the Lord as the people watched. The armed warriors from the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh led the Israelites across the Jordan just as Moses had directed. These armed men, about 40,000 strong, were ready for battle, and the Lord was with them as they crossed over to the plains of Jericho. That day the Lord made Joshua a great leader in the eyes of all the Israelites, and for the rest of his life they revered him much as they had revered Moses. The Lord had said to Joshua, command the priests carrying the Ark of the Covenant to come up out of the riverbed. So Joshua gave the command. As soon as the priests carrying the Ark of the Lord's Covenant came up out of the riverbed and their feet were on high ground, the water of the Jordan returned and overflowed its banks as before. The people crossed the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month. I told you that was when it was. Here's where it says that. This day in the ancient Hebrew lunar calendar occurred in late March, April, or early May. Okay. Then they camped at Gilgal, just east of Jericho. It was there at Gilgal that Joshua piled up the 12 stones taken from the Jordan River. Then Joshua said to the Israelites, excuse me, in the future your children will ask, what do these stones mean? Then you can tell them, this is where the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry ground. For the Lord your God dried up the river right before your eyes, and he kept it dry until you were all across, just as he did at the Red Sea, when he dried it up until we had all crossed over. He did this so all the nations of the earth might know that the Lord's hand is powerful, and so you might fear the Lord your God forever. So, in a sort of repetition of the divine intervention at the Reed Sea or the Red Sea, God now does an act that establishes Joshua as his approved leader. And it does appear, as we read through this book, that the people, in fact, honored Joshua as they did Moses. That doesn't mean they were perfect, but it does seem that they did honor him as they had Moses, and that he was a respected leader of the nation. When all the Amorite kings west of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings who lived along the Mediterranean coast heard how the Lord had dried up the Jordan River so the people of Israel could cross, they lost heart and were paralyzed with fear because of that. They're coming to take your land. Their God is with them. Their God has done things you can't explain, demonstrating his power. They're paralyzed with fear. But being humans, they didn't want to give up their land. So they would stay there and suffer the genocide that would take place, rather than recognize God's hand in what was happening and save themselves by moving somewhere else. That's human nature. We want to consider that we have this ownership culture. This is mine, you can't take it. Over my dead body. So the people of Israel said, okay, we can accommodate that. At that time the Lord told Joshua, make flint knives and circumcise this second generation of Israelites. So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the entire male population of Israel at Gibeath Haraloth. A couple of footnotes there. Circumcised the Israelites a second time. Gibeath Haraloth means hill of foreskins. That's a kind of a gruesome name. Joshua had to circumcise them because all the men who were old enough to fight in battle when they left Egypt had died in the wilderness. Those who left Egypt had all been circumcised, but none of those born after the Exodus during the years in the wilderness had been circumcised. The Israelites had traveled in the wilderness for 40 years, until all the men who were old enough to fight in battle when they left Egypt had died. For they had disobeyed the Lord, and the Lord vowed he would not let them enter the land he had sworn to give us, a land flowing with milk and honey. So Joshua circumcised their sons, those who had grown up to take their fathers' places, for they had not been circumcised on the way to the promised land. After all the males had been circumcised, they rested in the camp until they were healed. Yes, that's gruesome. Perhaps less so in that day as it would be in our day, where we just consider that a form of barbaric genital I had the word on the tip of my tongue going, what to say it? Mutilation. Male genital mutilation is not as destructive as is female genital mutilation is normally practiced. But it is that practice, and it was the sign, and we might wonder about that. We know that in the New Testament that had been the sign that the Israelites clung to as the mark of their uniqueness and of their acceptance with God. And Paul said, it doesn't matter. If you're not circumcised, don't get circumcised. It doesn't matter. It doesn't count. You aren't any better with God if you are. You aren't any worse with God if you aren't. So ignore it. Anyway. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have rolled away the shame of your slavery in Egypt," so that place has been called Gilgal to this day. And Gilgal sounds like the Hebrew word galal, meaning to roll. All right. While the Israelites were camped at Gilgal on the plains of Jericho, they celebrated Passover on the evening of the 14th day of the first month. In other words, 4 days after they crossed Jordan. That would be the time to celebrate Passover. And they're going to tell us that this day in the ancient Hebrew lunar calendar occurred in late March, April, or early May. Once again. The very next day they began to eat unleavened bread and roasted grain harvested from the land. No manna appeared on the day they first ate from the crops of the land, and was never seen again. So from that time on, the Israelites ate from the crops of Canaan. And now comes a very interesting passage. When Joshua was near the town of Jericho, he looked up and he saw a man standing in front of him with sword in hand. Joshua went up to him and demanded, "Are you friend or foe?" Yeah. I don't know why you would ask that question. If you're a friend, you're going to say you're a friend. If you're a foe, you're going to say you're a friend. So you don't get whacked right there. But guess what this man says? Joshua confronts him, "Are you friend or foe?" "Neither one," he replied. "I am the commander of the Lord's army." At this, Joshua fell with his face to the ground in reverence. "I am at your command," Joshua said. What do you want your servant to do?" The commander of the Lord's army replied, "Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy." And Joshua did as he was told. Now, I think this is important for us to understand here. This man, and I think in a modern era we would say that this was probably Jesus. He's appearing in person to Joshua. He calls himself the commander of the Lord's army. I mean, these were people who lived in and for warfare. So he had to approach them in terms that they could understand. But notice he doesn't say, "I'm your friend, I'm your helper, I'm here to help you do what you're about to do." He says, neither one. I'm not here to help you, I'm not here to hinder you. I'm here to represent God to you. And then he tells him, "Take off your sandals, show me the traditional respect of your culture, because you're standing on holy ground. You are in the presence of your Maker." Now, this next discussion, is this a continuation of the event, or was that it? Because the chapter ends there, but then those aren't inspired. They aren't part of the original narrative. They're just what people thought. Now, the gates of Jericho were tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelites, and we're not going to go into this. I'm just getting this far. No one was allowed to go out or in, but the Lord said to Joshua, "I have given you Jericho, its king, and all its strong warriors. You and your fighting men should march around the town," blah, 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 blah. Are these the instructions that this man at the end of chapter 5 came to give, or is this a separate set of instructions? And we're going to make the point that what we're going to read here in chapter 6 is going to illustrate divine involvement. And yet we are going to hold that God didn't approve of the genocide, but he is living up to his covenant with his people and to his promise to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob to give them the land. So he's taking action to say that he's there and involved, but the action that he takes does not directly cause the deaths that will happen. The soldiers take care of that. So we will not go on with the actual story of what happens in the fall of Jericho. It should be fairly familiar to most of you. And because of the time, I think it's time for us to call this off. You may notice my wife didn't join. Her sleep cycle is such that she's asleep right now. Probably will be for another hour or so. Who knows? So that's why she didn't join us. Maybe she'll join us next week. Probably she will be available with our sermon presentation again. We will make that available on the group. Our plan is anyway. Make it available on the group at 11 o'clock Central Time. Now, if you watch these on YouTube, I have not been uploading the sermon presentations on the YouTube channel. Instead, you'll have to go to the group. In Vain Do They Worship Me. That's the name of the group on Facebook. And in that group, you'll find the sermon presentation there, starting about 11 o'clock tomorrow. So that's the plan. We don't, like James said, we don't guarantee anything. We just tell you what our plans are and say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. So otherwise, until next week when we plan to continue here in Joshua, we tell you goodbye and God bless.